We can no longer in society say, I'm okay, so it's okay.
We are here today with New York State Senator Jamaal Bailey, who represents the 36th New York State Senate District that encompasses Mount Vernon and parts of the North Bronx. Personally, how have you been dealing with the pandemic?
It's been tough. We've had loss in the family, unfortunately, as a result of COVID-19, and it's been a very difficult one to deal with from a personal perspective. But it's one of these things that it's affecting everybody. I think everybody knows somebody who has unfortunately either succumbed to this disease or has had a real rough go about it. And as a community, this is one of these times where we got to step up and figure out a way that we have to come together as one.
As an elected official, what do your days look like now?
They're much different. I would say to say the least, right? We have a number of Zoom calls because we still have to stay connected with our legislative work and the policy work that we do as legislators in order to make sure that we're still doing things from the legislative capacity side to do things. But from a community basis, it's being on the ground a lot, trying to figure out where the need is and being able to give out food and hand sanitizer and masks and do anything that you can do in our districts, specifically districts like mine who have, which have been really ravaged by coronavirus. The health department data showed that two of the districts that are contained within my two of the zip codes within my district, 10475 and 10469, are two of the hardest 10 hit zip codes in the entire city. So we've got a lot to do. And as elected officials, it's kind of the job that this is what people elect us for. This is the tough work, not necessarily the easy stuff, quote unquote, right? Even I don't think any part of our job is easy. I think that this is the time where we really have to step up. So it's really mixing Zoom meetings, staying connected policy-wise, by also being in your community and letting your community know that you have their back and that you're there with them.
Can you briefly describe the district that you represent?
Sure. So the 36th Senatorial District is the district of, it's Mount Vernon, the majority of the city of Mount Vernon and Westchester County, and then the northeast and the northwest Bronx. So you have communities like Norwood, Bedford Park, parts of Arlington, all of Co-op City, Wakefield, Williamsbridge, Baychester, Edenwald. So it's a community filled with essential workers, people who, when they say, hey, stay home, folks in my district, they can't stay home because they're the nurses, they're the MTA employees, they're the grocery workers, they're the 32BJ, janitor, members, senatorial service members who are keeping the city running and so many other careers. So they can't stay home, which is why the infection rate is so significant, I believe, in the district. And it's just one of these things that we have to keep working and keep getting a handle on. But that's the district in a nutshell.
Can you describe the demographics of your district?
Majority people of color, I would say largely Afro-Caribbean in the Wakefield section, African-American throughout Co-op City in the city of Mount Vernon, also Afro-Caribbean, Baychester as well. And when you get towards Arlington, Norwood, and Bedford Park, it becomes more of a racial and ethnic mix, but the majority of the district is full of people of color, African Americans and Latinos, who are, again, as you likely know, and statistics have told us that we're going to be more susceptible to being decimated, so to speak, by COVID-19.
Have you been able to be out in the community and interact with the people of your community in your district the best way that you can?
Well, in the interaction, yes, it's been different, right? It's not the total, like the town halls that we used to have or the meetings or the meet and greets per se. When we're out there, it's for an intended purpose. It is to ensure that we are bringing, what the community needs. So that's where, we'll go out in different parts of the district and provide, again, food, hand sanitizer, masks, like kind of anything that we can do to help people return to normalcy. And one of the other things that's happening is that a lot of people have unfortunately lost their jobs. So we are dealing with an unemployment crisis like we've never seen before. And so, we are doing our best to assist our constituents with unemployment issues. And I know that there's a huge backlog, but my office is working diligently and we're trying our best to do that. But as far as the interaction goes, it's definitely changed the way, and it's, the distance, it has been different, keeping 6 feet away at the very least from the majority of the people, having to greet people wearing masks with simple hellos as opposed to the traditional handshakes and fist bumps that we're used to, has been certainly a change. But I think our community is very resilient, and I think that I think we'll come out of this better, if at all possible.
Now, you are one of the few elected officials that represent a share of 2 different cities in 2 different counties. So when it comes to working with the Mount Vernon local government and the quote unquote New York City proper local government, what sort of differences that you have to balance or deal with in order to get things done?
Well, in times like this, the fortunate thing is that the usual differences that you would have between the city of New York and Mount Vernon are kind of like we're all on an equal playing field. In both communities right now, I've been able to work quite well with my colleagues in government to be able to get things for the people that we need them. In Mount Vernon, the mayor, I think she's been doing a phenomenal job. Mayor Sean Patterson Howard. We had a face mask giveaway and with sanitizer, and Attorney General Tish James came down. We've been doing, been able to reach out to and recognize our first responders and be able to provide them with some sort of food and just recognition that we appreciate them. And on the city side as well, being able to make sure that, again, we're doing everything that we can to make sure that people know that we're working for them in their time of need, because the reality is, like, we work for them, and that's where we have to be responsible to them. And I think that we're working together quite well in tandem between myself and the colleagues that share the both cities.
You mentioned that there's a lot of people in your district that have lost their jobs, and you are a member of the Committee on Commerce and Economic Development and Small Businesses. Are there any strategies that you're working on, given the difficulties of getting the appropriate federal service for small business owners?
Absolutely. So obviously, as you mentioned, we're waiting on the federal government, right? And as elected officials, it's not, what we shouldn't be doing is saying the federal government or it's agency X versus agency Y. But in this situation, it really is based upon the circumstance. The federal government has to do better with providing New York State with funds so that we can make sure that we provide our residents with what they need. If we don't get what we need from the federal government, the nature of the budget cuts will be, from what we're seeing and what we're hearing, they're never going to be, they're going to be things that we've never seen before. So what we're trying to do at the state level, work with our partners in government, and the Governor Cuomo just announced $100 million to go towards small businesses in the state. And that we're going to work with ESD, Empire State Development. I'm going to work with the governor's office to try to make sure that the money gets to the small businesses that need them in our communities, because small businesses are the lifeblood of our communities, right? Like, and I know we say that one Saturday a year, oh, Small Business Saturday, go shop small. But the reality is this, right? When I've needed to partner with organizations to help feed people, with organizations that have just emailed us, say, hey, we have these things to give out to community. How can we help? Small businesses who are donating rides to first responders. These are people who, they're not big box stores. They don't have They're not incredibly well funded, but they work and they live here and they're out on the front lines. So these are the people who, like, they haven't thought twice about their margins. And I'm not a business person, but I can't imagine that they're making much money right now, if at all. Maybe they're breaking even at best, but they're doing it because they love the communities that they serve and that they work and live in. And we have to make sure that we are paying close attention to ensuring that that around $100 million gets to the place that need it the most.
As you mentioned before, you represent uh, a district that is majority people of color. And we're seeing a lot of social distancing crackdowns being almost, it appears to be targeted towards people of color. What are the things that you are doing and your colleagues are doing to help sort of try to alleviate this issue?
So want to recognize that the first responders in the NYPD and in Mount Vernon PD, they're doing a really tough job in difficult times. But these times are difficult for all of us, right? And the statistics that were shown early in the city of New York were that roughly 81% of the summonses given for social distancing were given to people of color. If you're a basketball fan, 81% is a cool free throw percentage. It's not a good percentage when you're stopping and giving tickets to people of color. That is overburdensome. So what myself and many of my colleagues in government, on this one, Senator Brian Benjamin led the way with a letter indicating that, the NYPD, you should be out of the social distancing business. And with all due respect, the NYPD has greater things to do. I think they have the capacity to do much more, and they really are in the business of saving lives, and I appreciate that. That being said, I don't know if we need their capital and their skill set on enforcing social distancing, especially in some of the ways that we've seen it distance. People being thrown to the ground for not wearing masks, and it seems always when we capture these things, it always seems to be people of color. And the split screen that we saw, which was on social media, that you probably saw it, and so many other people have seen it that are going to watch. That on one side you see in Central Park an NYPD officer handing out masks, and on the other side of the screen you see an NYPD officer standing over a person of color, presumably having used some sort of force to enforce a mask or social distancing, the lack of wearing a mask or a social distancing thing. So it's frustrating, but to the mayor's credit and to the NYPD's credit, they've announced that the NYPD is not going to be enforcing the social distancing concerns anymore, absent larger groups that could conceivably turn out to be something on a larger scale. And speaking to the county executive and members in Westchester County, this has not been that much of an issue, at least data statistically. And you hear of a case or two that are an outlier in Mount Vernon, but for the most part, this isn't something that we've had to that we've had to deal with in Mount Vernon like we've had to deal with in the city of New York. My major concern is that as the weather warms up and people no longer adhere to the distancing, shouldn't say no longer adhere, but when it's warmer, people are naturally going to go outside more. And when they go outside more, they may be more inclined to gather together. And I want to make sure that we stay safe and that we apply the distancing so that the people doing that, they should know, don't do that. Don't gather together so densely, but also they should not live in double fear. One, of contracting COVID-19, which is so devastating. But secondly, you shouldn't also have to worry about being thrown on the ground or disproportionately enforced just because you're a person of color wearing a mask.
At the beginning of all of this, there was a lot of disarray about how we do the virtual learning, the materials that are needed for the virtual learning. From the start of the stay-at-home order to now, have you been able to see any progress in that area, from having a lack of materials immediately available to how the curriculums are being disseminated?
That's a really good question, and I kind of have firsthand experience because, like my new career, sometimes is that I've become the facilitator for distance learning with my oldest daughter, and she's only in kindergarten. But I will say I got to give credit to her school, PS 153 in the Bronx, for having a solid plan. The teacher is understanding of the hours of working people. She makes herself accessible to parents if we need to reach out to them. And I feel, in my opinion, but based upon what I'm seeing, that the structure has gone well with my child. Now, I will say that's not been the case for every child. I've heard of in cases where children that they don't have devices, and if you don't have a device, that really sets you back in terms of being able to get your work done. And if you can't get your work done, that's going to set you back educationally. And even if you have a device, again, so many of our constituents and so many folks in our community, they still live, I don't want to say in poverty per se, but they're not in a situation where they may have internet access. They can't go to the libraries because the libraries aren't open. So like we're in a situation that it's kind of concerning. And I think the DOE has done their best in a world that we, quite honestly, nobody was expecting. But I think that's been one of the major challenges, just the lack of devices, lack of device availability to everybody else.
So you feel like there's been no progress from the start of since the start of the pandemic, or it's just it is what it is for now?
I think that it's been a work in progress, right? Because obviously at the beginning of it, we weren't sure exactly how this was going to go. It was sort of, hey, we got to teach the kids. We can't be in the buildings. We have to do it remotely. And I think with anything, people getting a level of comfort with online, facilitating with teachers. And I give teachers all the credit in the world because like being able to do that often, often having families of their own that they have to tend to during these days and times, not knowing what their particular life situations are at home. Teachers still have to make sure that they're instructing our kids. Same thing with the administrators. The administrators and teachers, they have to work together to ensure that that there is a sound and coherent plan for our kids. So I would definitely say that progress has been made. I think that this is a great learning experience that we should always have like in the back of our mind, looking at what like what a worst case scenario looks like. And and hopefully if we go back to school in September, right? If the kids are able to go back in time for September, what does that look like? Is it going to be every day? Will there be a component of distance learning that is required because we're still not where we need to be, as a state, right? So those are things that we all need to be learning and trying to figure out, in our entire state. But I think that I give our educators and our administrators credit to that they've been dealing with really rough circumstances, and I think they're doing their best with it.
Can you tell me about if there's any sort of progress? How close is there, like a flat out rent freeze, and some other things that we may not be thinking about to address that?
So we haven't yet decided on what the package looks like, but we know for sure that something needs to be done because everybody's affected, right? This isn't one of the situations where you can just say, let's freeze rent or cancel rent and then leave out property owners, right? Because there, at least in my opinion, there are three different types of folks in the situation, right? You have tenants, and tenants are going through it just like anybody else's. Many folks have lost their jobs, as we've already spoken about, so they don't have the ability to pay right now. And from what I'm seeing, those who have been able to pay, they are paying, right? But we should be able to create something for those folks who aren't able to pay, right? Like figure something out for them. We should also figure something out, however, for property owners, both commercial and private. commercial and non-commercial, I should say, not private, excuse me, commercial and non-commercial, right? Because if you have a tenant and they can't pay rent, and I have a mortgage, I still have to be able to pay my mortgage. So there has to be something that makes everybody whole. Well, the third conversation that people don't speak as much about is because the living situation is considered to be most important. The habitability, making sure that people have a safe habitable place to live. Housing is a human right, absolutely. But people in my district, many of them have worked very hard to pay their mortgages off, and many of these folks have tenants. And so, if you're free and clear on your mortgage, but you still have property tax to pay, you still have a water bill to pay, and you worked hard to pay that mortgage off for 30 years to ensure that you were able to realize your dream, right? And we always encourage people to seek out the American dream and home ownership, but we can't then say the tenant, if you have a tenant, they're okay. But that homeowner, even if they don't have a mortgage, is not going to be able to benefit in some shape, form, or fashion. That is one of the major concerns that I have, especially representing Mount Vernon and Wakefield. Those are my larger homeowner communities, and just making sure that the renters in Norwood and Bedford Park and in the entire district, they're taken care of, and the cooperators in Co-op City are taken care of. But the homeowners, you have to figure out, make sure that the mortgages are okay, and that those who are free and clear on mortgage, we figure out something to ensure that we're not going to decimate them with property taxes or water or sewer or things of that nature.
So, are there anything specific that are occurring in your district that maybe is happening more in your district than any neighboring districts or from around the city?
Well, the infection rate, yeah, roughly 40%. And if you're talking about the Wakefield, Williamsbridge, and Co-op City area, essential workers, we in the to the mayor and the governor's credit, they've been able to get us some testing sites. I'd like to see even more testing sites. This is just something that I'd like for people to be able to access testing and antibody testing as quickly and as often as they can. Because as we advance from phase one, hopefully sooner rather than later in the city of New York, to all of the to a complete reopening, we're going to have to really see that consistent and ongoing testing is going to be a part of that, right? Just because we're past the initial horror doesn't mean that we're all the way through, and doesn't mean that we don't need testing, especially in communities that people cannot stay home in. I cannot emphasize that enough. Like these are the bus drivers, the subway operators, the nurses, the 32BJ and all of the union representative members and those folks. Like these are the people who they cannot stay home, even if you or I could. Neither one of us can, right? But even if we could stay home, right? Like those folks can't. So I think that's one of the things that we have to make sure we're highlighting. Testing sites in Mount Vernon and in Co-op City, mass distributions in Wakefield and in Co-op City and in Norwood, and just making sure that we're taking care of our public hospital system and North Central Bronx Hospital and Montefiore, and just making sure that we recognize that we're in this together.
Now, given the nature of all of this and how social media is just a big part of our lives, we get bombarded with a lot of information, and a lot of it is misinformation that tends to be harmful. How do you see that your district has been affected in any way, and because of these things that are being shared?
Well, it's important that people are critical consumers of information. And in times like this, where we have a pandemic, where people are looking for something to hold on to, something to believe in, people can be very susceptible to either scams or misinformation. And I just want my community to know that, to remain vigilant. And if you have a question about the validity of something, you should reach out to our office. As you said, often, something that Well, I saw it on Twitter, so it's got to be true. We have to be better consumers of information, which is why, like, one of the things I do every weekday and once on a weekend, I send out an email update about what's happening with COVID-19, daily updates, any possible reopenings, or just things that are happening within the community, because I want to be able to give people information that they can do what they please with it, right? Because I can't tell people how to feel, right? I don't want to tell people how to feel. I want people to believe that we can get through this together, and I want people to have an understanding that we're stronger and better together. But I can't say you should feel this certain way about this, or this is happening without a doubt. So, it's just, I want to make sure that I'm doing my part in helping to dispel any misinformation campaigns that are happening.
Is there anything that you would like to say or express that hasn't been discussed so far?
This is one of these times that I don't think that we've ever seen before, at least in my lifetime, in my generation. And I just want people to know that the way that things have changed and the way that they'll continue to change, that it's going to be an ongoing it's going to be an ongoing process. I just want everybody to stand strong together and continue to stand strong. When we had 9/11, another really sad day in New York City, in New York State, we banded together for a really short period of time, and then it became business as usual, so to speak, right? Where people went off in their own individual areas, and it's all good now. I'm getting mine, but I always like to say, you're affected by the actions and the words of everybody else. If you live in an apartment building, you can have the cleanest apartment building in the world. You can have spotless floors. What if one of your neighbors is unkempt, right? And something happens in their home, what will happen to them will happen to you. We can no longer in society say, I'm okay, so it's okay. We have to really start looking at, we all have to be okay in order to make sure everybody's okay. Because we're seeing it with the mass rates of infection. We're seeing it with the social distancing, is that one person that has COVID can unknowingly sometimes affect or infect. Both words are proper here. Hundreds or thousands of people. So I think that we all have to continue to stay vigilant, wash our hands, distance, wear masks, and just stay tuned and continue to pay attention.
State Senator Jamaal Bailey, thank you for the time that you're taking out, and thank you for all your work and everything that you're doing to help everyone. And we'll talk soon.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.